Good morning, everyone. Hopefully that you can all see and hear me all right. Welcome to our virtual tour of Lindisfarne this year. So today I am actually joining you live from the island itself. We've been here for the past 3 weeks, continuing our search for the evidence of the early medieval monastery. Today, you're going to get a chance to see what's been going on in our trenches. But before we get started, I just wanted to let you all know that unfortunately, we won't be getting a live look into the trenches today. We did do a signal tour yesterday, and not only was it so incredibly windy, so it was impossible to hear, but also the signal was just so poor. So what we've done is we've pre-recorded a tour of the trenches for you today, last thing yesterday for you to look back on now. Apologies for any disappointment this might cause, but actually I think that Ben and Maggie have done a really cracking job, and it's going to be just as great as seeing it live. And you can play a fun game of Spot Genie in the background as I was on site, so you will be able to see me. But before we get started, let me share my screen and we'll run through what we're doing today. Of course, as always, be patient with us. Zoom is great, but it is technology, and sometimes it can be a little bit tricky on us. If anything does go wrong, give me a couple of minutes and I'll get us back to working order again, but do bear with us. And last but not least, as always on Lindisfarne, this tour will contain images of human remains and discussion of human remains as well. So if that's something you're not comfortable with, please just be aware that that will definitely be happening. As always, if you want to learn more about archaeology, don't forget to become a subscriber to access our courses. But before we sort of get into what we're doing today, I'm going to kick off with a massive thank you to all of our crowdfunders for this year on Lindisfarne for not only making this event possible and our Finds Room event last week possible, but making sure that the entire dig can take place. Like I said last week, your contribution is what allows us to do all of this, to make these discoveries and to share this archaeology with the world like we're doing here today. So we are very, very grateful for each and every one of you, whether you're with us on site or watching us online. Coming up today, I'm going to do a quick introduction to the site, a little bit of the history for anyone who's new. Then we're going to see our virtual tour recorded by Ben and Maggie yesterday. And finally, I'll be here for a bit of a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the tour today, whether it's in the introduction or in the video itself, do just drop them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them for you once we are through with the tour. So I thought I'd start off by just a little bit of an introduction. I'm sure most of you know Lindisfarne, you're probably aware of it, you've probably seen it around, but I thought I would just get going by running through a quick recap. So you can see Lindisfarne there is right up in the north of England, so close to that Scottish border, and it is a tidal island. Today it's a place where land and sea meet. It's full of these rich tapestries of marshes, mudflats, sand dunes, beaches. It's a very beautiful place, and it is a privilege to be here. Despite the early medieval monastery being one of the most important sites in English history, not a lot of archaeology has been done here, really, until now. And following some intriguing geophysics results and a bit of courting by David Petts from Durham University, we decided to come dig here with Durham in 2016. So our mission is to determine what, if anything, remains of the original early medieval monastery. This year is, I think, our 7th season digging, and we're really, really excited to share what's come up because it's been fantastic, absolutely mind-blowing archaeology. But before we get started, for any of you newbies out there, I'll just run through a quick bit of history for you. So this goes all the way back to AD 635, when King Oswald of Northumbria founded a monastery on the tiny island of Lindisfarne. The island might have been small, but this monastery quickly became the beating heart of the powerful early medieval Kingdom of Northumbria, as well as the wellspring of England's Christianity. There are quite a few celebrity names attached to the early medieval monastery that you might recognize if you're big on your early medieval or early Christian history, including St. Aidan and St. Cuthbert, both of whom were very connected to the monastery. Lindisfarne's monks definitely kept busy. We know that they were farming, fishing, and creating glittering treasures like the Gospels, on top of as well playing host to thousands of miracle-seeking pilgrims who would have visited each year. So this is a really rich monastery, much more vast than the priory that we see that's still standing today, which you can see behind my head. It would have been more of a complex, probably mostly made of timber and stretching underneath the modern village that's there today. But I think, as you all know, you'll be aware that disaster did strike in the form of some very famous raiders. So popularized by the TV shows like The Last Kingdom and the Vikings. We, of course, know that the Vikings came over from Scandinavia. There was a group of raiders, traders, and settlers who all launched a series of attacks and settlement and occupation throughout Europe and beyond. So it wasn't always violent, it wasn't always raiding, but in this case it was. In 793, the Vikings launched their bloodiest attack on the British Isles yet. And their target was right here. It was Lindisfarne. So following the first sort of devastating raid, a number of other raids took place. And it does look like the main bulk of the presence on the island did eventually move on. Of course, the newer priory being built indicates that people would have returned to the island and the Christian presence would have still been here. And we do suspect that not everyone would have left in the interim as well. The archaeology just sort of proved that there were things happening here in between. But we want to know about this first monastery, that original one that's no longer standing. What was life like for these monks and the wider community that was attached to them? What was the story of the monastery? What, if anything, was there before? Did they really all leave? The questions are endless, but the search for answers is the best bit. And as you can see, we've been having so much fun this year. Here are a few dig highlights. There's a couple of features in there that you'll probably see in the tour itself. But we also have had some great finds this year. We've had Dig Camp as well, who've done some great work. And in our finds room, we've had a fantastic time putting together some mini museums that you would have seen if you joined us on the finds room tour last year. So we've really been having a great time, and it's just been such a fantastic year. We're really excited to show you what we've got. So without further ado, I'm going to switch off my camera so that I can share the video that Maggie, Ben, and I put together for you yesterday. So it's about 25 minutes and you'll get a proper look around all our trenches. So bear with me and I'll share that for you now.
Welcome everyone to site. So here we are on the island on a really sunny day. First trench I'm going to take you through at the minute is trench number 8, which is a brand new trench this year, only a small one. But the reason that we put this trench in was because we were looking for the northern limit of the cemetery. So we've got this large cemetery that expands over most of the area behind us where we're digging. We've got skeletons in every trench, and this year we wanted to find the northern extent of that cemetery. And the answer to that question is we haven't found it. We've got more burials in trench 8. They seem to be a bit more spaced out. They're not as sort of churned up through ploughing and through other intercutting graves over the years. So that suggests to us that we are coming towards the edge of the cemetery. It's getting less dense as we come further north, but we haven't found that actual extent, the boundary yet. We're still within the cemetery limits. So what we did last week was we had some students in here and they excavated out one of our graves just to kind of prove that it definitely was a grave, as it was. We had a skeleton come out of there which has been carefully excavated, sent to the finds room, and that has been washed and cleaned, processed now, and that will go off to our specialists after the dig, who will assess it and tell us a bit more about it. And really that's the story of Trench 8. It's finished now. They did a great job of digging it, recording it. So yeah, Trench 8 has answered our questions, and we can put it to bed for this year and move on to other stuff next year. So this is our first trench. I think we'll now move over to trench number 1, which is not too far away. It's just behind, just to the south. Trench 1 is the very first trench that we ever put in on Lindisfarne in 2016. And we've gone back to it last year and also come back again this year. Because we had a number of interesting features we wanted to keep looking at that we discovered last year. For example, we had a gully, a stone-lined cut gully into the ground. We wanted to know where that was going, what direction it was travelling in. And we also had a number of burials, one of which was particularly interesting that Karen found last year. We excavated half of it out, and our osteologist told us that it had evidence of possible bone cancer, which is very sort of almost unique for this period. We haven't found too many of those over the course of all archaeology in the country. So we came back again this year to excavate the rest of that skeleton, so we had the complete thing, and the osteologists can look at it as one complete body and tell us more about it. Other things that we've got in this trench, we have a lot, as you can see, a lot of stones. Some of these stones are arranged in lines. For example, at the back of the trench we have, you can probably just about see 2 or 3 really large blocks of stone, and then just behind them we have some flat, almost paving like slabs. So the questions that we had is, do we have some sort of wall or structure and a surface, a sort of a flagged or paved surface? Is that what's going on in this area? So we've come back, we've investigated that this year, trying to look for more evidence of, is that the case? What have we got? Do we have a structure? How old is it? And what we found instead was lots more skeletons, lots more burials. So just below where the stones are, there are a number of skulls, about 3 or 4 skulls just popping through the top of the ground, which is showing us again that story that the cemetery is getting more dense, more occupied as we come further south towards the centre of Sanctuary Close, just behind the priory. So yeah, this trench has been really interesting, very productive this year. We've had a lot out of it, lots of bones, lots of potential walls and surfaces. So it's been a worthwhile task, and yeah, next year we'll probably come back and do it a little bit more, see if we can make even more sense out of our structures and get any more dating evidence out of them. So yeah, that's kind of trench 1. What we'll do now is start to move our way across to trench 2 east. And trench 2 is another one of our trenches that was started in 2016, and it is split between east and west because it has a big power cable running between both of the trenches. So we didn't want to obviously dig through that, that wouldn't have gone too well for us. So we split the 2 trenches in half for that reason. So we're just going to head over to trench 2 east, and we'll see what they've been discovering in there. We've had some really nice discoveries, as we'll start to talk about once we arrive. A lot more skeletons, a lot more graves, some more walls, some more big masonry blocks, some more possible surfaces, and of course our focal grave, our focal burial that we will have been talking about in previous years, if anyone has been listening to any of our previous tours as well. So we're nearly there, we're just coming to the back of trench 2 east now. And here we are. So the first thing that we can see are, we've got these really big masonry blocks. They're tooled. You might be able to see the tool markings on them just here, like that. And also on the one next to it, we have some even nicer tool markings. You can see them going diagonally across, and some coming just like this as well. So really big chunks of stone. These have been moved from their original position. We've fully recorded them, so we moved them to see what we could do, what we could see underneath. So that's why they're over here, and we're able to see those really nice markings on them. So as we move further into the trench, hopefully you can see our adventurers here are cleaning up our possible sort of paved or flagged surface just outside where those stones originally were. So they're looking really nice now. As you can see, you could easily walk across that as a nice flat surface. And really we want to be finding out more about that. How far does it extend? Are there any more burials cut through it or underneath it? That will be one of our questions probably for next year. And really just get a bit more of an understanding of how old it is, what it was for, why is it here, those fundamental questions that we're interested in answering. Just next to this surface we have our charnel pit. It was discovered a few years ago, and what it is a big pit that was dug in the ground, and a lot of the bones from previously disturbed burials were deposited in here, just really to keep them in one place, to save them from being disturbed yet again by more grave digging, and putting more people in the ground. They've gathered them all together and put them in one place. It's a bit like for safekeeping, almost like a crypt today, although this time they've just dug a hole in the ground to keep them all in one place. As we turn just to the right here, you'll notice this really big hole in the ground that we've excavated. This is part of our focal grave. We've had now 7 individuals out of this one small area in the trench. They were all buried one on top of the other. We had some of our stone lining that we've excavated out now. Last year, some of you might remember that we had some name stones out of that stone lining. They were really nice. So we've excavated that out, we've removed them now, we've taken out the bodies, we've got to the bottom at last, we think. And that is, yeah, that's where our focal grave was, as our helipad is now demonstrating for us. As we move further up in the trench, start to see more and more burials appearing. We have a skull just here, another one coming up just next to us where Ali is, and under every one of these tarps is another burial, another skeleton that has been put in here. So again, we're in a really dense part of the cemetery, intercutting graves, graves on top of graves. And that was a story last year and previous years in this area. It's been one of the densest parts of the site in terms of burials and cemetery. So yeah, that's kind of the story of Trench 2 East. We've been getting lots of finds out of here, some examples from the tray as we were getting across site, pieces of shell, sort of seafood would be the things they're eating. Quartz pebbles, these are the sort of things that they would have been perhaps using to mark their graves out, so they would have been shining relatively nicely and white on the top of the graves to mark them out. And obviously lots of bone. As this is a cemetery, there will be bones all the time. Some of it is, well, a lot of it is not what we call articulated, it's disarticulated. It's been sort of churned up in the ground, and we find them not where they should be in relation to the body. So we just collect them together and clean them up and process them as we would anything else. Some other little things we've been finding, St. Cuthbert's beads. Some of these are really, really tiny, and some of them are a little bit bigger, like this one here. I don't know if you can see that. These are actually fossils, and we keep them because there is some evidence of them being almost drilled through and used as a necklace. The centre of the fossil is almost like a star shape. And so they can be sometimes drilled through and turned into necklaces. So yeah, a nice little selection of finds from here, which seems to be quite similar to a lot of the finds that we've had throughout the site as a whole in general. So yeah, that's Trench 2 East. I think now we'll head over to Trench 2 West. So the western side is our biggest trench. It seems to have grown a lot over the years. It started off not too dissimilar in size to this one here, but it's grown and got bigger and bigger. And it's also moved further north as well. Last year, the back of Trench 2 West was around about here where I am just now. But we've moved it quite a lot further north, just to really find out more about the features that we've uncovered last year that I'll show you very shortly. So here we are now, just about to head into Trench 2 West. And the first area that we come to is where Chris is digging in our metalworking area. So if you've been following us before, you may have heard that we've been talking quite a lot about our metalworking area over the years. It's been one of those things that we first discovered a good sort of 3 or 4 years ago now, and we've been struggling to get to grips with it. We'd found evidence of copper metalworking slag, other metallurgical debris, hearth linings, things like that, but nothing ever seemed to be what we call in situ, so in the original place that it was found. We thought we'd found pits, we thought we'd found some features, but none of it ever was very clear and didn't entirely make sense. And this year we've answered the question as to why that is. What's been happening is we've got a lot of burials, basically. We've had 4 individuals out of this very small area here. We had one just under where the tarp is that we left in the ground. We had one just in this little rectangle here that we've lifted out. There was another one directly above that, and we've also just discovered yet another one where Chris is digging just now. By carefully excavating out all of these graves one at a time, we've been able to reconstruct exactly where the original metalworking pit or hearth was. That's kind of our latest, newest discovery in the metalworking area. We found evidence of in situ burning. It's been heavily what we call truncated, so dug away, cut away by later burials, but we do have hints of the burnt edge, the original burnt edge of the metalworking pit just coming through here, where it's that intense reds and blacks. That is the original edge of the pit there. We pick it up again just further over towards the middle. We have more of that burnt black and red here, and a little bit here as well, and also just towards the western edge as well. So we've got pieces of our original in situ metalworking hearth or pit, but it has been heavily dug through, cut through by later burials. We had 3 post holes right next to it. They luckily did survive the process of burials. Only just, as you can see, the burial is right next to them. It's cut right the way through the side. So they were quite lucky to survive. So this has come on leaps and bounds this year. Hopefully next year we might be able to fully answer it, fully get to the bottom of that pit. Okay then, so moving on to the next part. Here we are with a big wall. You might be able to see we've got these large mudstone facing stones on either side of an east-west aligned wall. This wall has at some point collapsed, because you can see just next to it towards the north we have these large boulders that seem to have tumbled over when the wall collapsed. They have collapsed onto what we think is a surface, some sort of floor surface, where we've got these cobbles here, these nice flat cobbles. So we're hoping this is our original sort of floor surface that when the wall collapsed, that rubble fell onto. And one thing that you might also be able to see here is how the wall is almost at an angle. It seems to be like it's fallen down, it's slumped down. It's on a bit of a strange angle. And the answer to that will become apparent in a few moments as we go further north. But moving on to the next area of our trench, as you can see just behind me here, we have another really big thick wall. We've got one end of it here. This is one face on this side, and as I move over, this is the other face of it just here. So another really large, really wide wall. And the interesting thing about both of these walls, this one and the one we've just looked at, is that they must be early. All of the burials that we've had are either cut through the wall, so they've come through at a later time and dug away parts of the wall, or there doesn't seem to be any burials at all underneath them. So that tells us that they must at least be earlier than the cemetery. And this particular wall here, last year, is where we found a piece of Samian pottery. So that's a Roman find. It was just the one, so we can't say that this is a Roman wall necessarily. But what we have done is taken samples of bone and charcoal that was found in and amongst and underneath these walls to send them off for radiocarbon dating so that we can find out how old they are. So a couple of really big walls that you might remember from last year. And also, what you might remember from last year is our stone-lined drain, just here. Really nicely constructed. It seems to be a channel that's leading all the way through the width of the trench. It skirts around this big slab. And what I think might be happening is these big slabs that I'm walking on are some sort of pathway, maybe across the drain. The drain would have been stone capped as well, leading towards a new discovery this year, a stone-lined box. When we first found this box, we thought perhaps it was a small stone-lined burial, but we've had a number of other stone-lined burials out of here over the years. But when we excavated the box out, there were no bones in it, no human bones anyway. So another theory is that it's some sort of water storage tank. It's clay lined, there seems to be clay underneath it and along the sides to keep it watertight. And we have a similar story with our stone-lined drain. It's been packed with clay as well to keep it watertight. So perhaps there's water management going on here. Exactly what that's for is a bit more tricky to say, but it could be contemporary or perhaps later than the walls that we've just looked at. We knew that this stone-lined drain was here from last year, but what we didn't know is how far it extended. This year we pushed our trench, or our excavation slot anyway, further to the west, and we found a continuation. So we have the drain keeps going towards Jill and just behind her. In this area it seems to get a little bit more loose and craggy and sort of breaks apart and sort of peters out and disappears towards the back of where Jill is. So what we think is happening is that over the years burials have truncated it, they've cut it away. The lime kiln has also come through here and probably dug it away as well. We've had also 2 neonatal burials here this year. One of them which Jill is excavating just now, and one of them that was just behind me. So these are other things that could have dug away parts of the drain over time. So yeah, another exciting area and exciting developments this year with the drain extending, the walls becoming bigger, and the potential for them being quite early as well. And you'll notice also, as I was mentioning earlier about the wall seemed to be slumping down, our drain also appears to be slumping down as well, and our large slab. The reason that's important is because of the next thing that I'm about to take you over to see, which is up towards the north. What we discovered this year that we thought, for the last couple of years we had inklings might have existed, was that there was a long linear ditch running right the way through the trench from north through to south. And that's exactly what we found. Caroline and Lana and Joe here have been excavating out our ditch expertly. We've been a little bit hampered by the presence of yet more burials. We've had another 3 individuals in here that have been sort of cut into, dug into the ditch. We've excavated them out carefully, and now we are through that burial layer and we are properly into the lower fills of the ditch, and we're hoping to excavate that out fully by the end of the dig this year. What's particularly exciting about this ditch is that its potential, well, it is the earliest feature that we've got on site so far. It could even be possibly prehistoric, probably Iron Age if it was. Everything else in the trench either cuts through it or overlies it. It must be the earliest feature that we have on site, and the reason we think it could be prehistoric is that the walls that overlie it, they don't fit with that sort of sequence of early medieval monastery. They're very, we wouldn't expect stone constructions like that. So there's a potential that we have an early large sort of structure, stone built structure, which if they are on top of the ditch means it must be earlier than that as well. So what we want to do is get to the bottom, get some nice datable material out of it, get some samples from it, something that we might be able to send for carbon dating and give us a really fixed date on exactly how old this ditch is. Potentially we could be pushing the story of our site back from the early medieval right the way through the Roman and into the prehistoric, which is a really exciting thing for this year. Obviously we've still got to prove that, but that's something that seems to be an increasing possibility, which is really exciting. So, I mean, I've had a great year in this trench, and I think all of our lovely students and venturers also have as well. And across the site as a whole, it's been another really exciting year. I hope you've all enjoyed a little tour of site today. And now I'm going to head back to Jenny, who I think is going to talk about questions. Thank you.
And thank you to Ben for leading that tour as well. I think it's incredible that he managed to talk for so long about everything we have on site. And I hope that you all feel like you've learned a bit about what we've got up to this year. Isn't it amazing? The things that we found, we're so excited. But as Ben mentioned, now is the time for questions. So if there's anything that you saw on the tour that you'd like to know more about, ask away and I'm happy to help. So anything at all. There was one question that was posted in the chat earlier by Dan. Dan asked about the drain source and endpoint. As far as I know, we're not sure exactly what that is, but that's one of the questions we want to answer. What is the purpose of this drain? What is it for? Is it linked to any industry or anything else? So what we've been doing this year is, as Ben said, just sort of carefully investigating that drain and trying to track more of it down to see where it goes. So yeah, keep an eye on that one. But we're very excited by some of these features that are coming up, which, like Ben said, are much earlier than we expected to find. So it's really, really exciting. Does anyone else have any Q&A questions or anything at all you'd like to know or share about what you've seen on site? I'll give you a few minutes to ask if there is any. In the meantime, I will say that we're nearly at the end of the dig this year, actually. So it's the 22nd today, and we wrap up digging on the 24th. So let's see what else comes up in the meantime. It's always the pattern, isn't it? That it's the last weekend of the dig is where you find something really exciting. It was about this time last year that I think we started to uncover that drain in the first place. So who knows what might come up in the next couple of days. So do keep your eye out. Tom has asked, do we know what was in the charcoal burial in the Eastern Trench? So I believe we did lift that burial and we'll look into it more. As far as I'm aware, it was obviously packed with charcoal, and then we had some sort of animal, whether it was a pig or a dog or something. We still needed to determine that. And as well, there was an infant burial in there as well, we believe, but we'll look into that more. That's something that we'll investigate. And as always, with any remains, human remains that we lift from site, they will be returned back to site after analysis. They will not be kept by us. Rose is asking, what is the current thinking about the dating of the cemetery? The cemetery is a really expansive one, and over the years we've found graves that go all the way into the Norman period associated with this priory, and all the way back to early medieval. So it's a vast cemetery that has been used for such a long time, and this is why sometimes it makes it quite hard to see where burials originally were, they get churned up quite a lot, as Ben mentioned, because this site has just been used over such a long period of time, that things do get a little bit jumbled. So yeah, it's a very sort of long-lasting cemetery that was used for generations upon generations of people. So very, very interesting. Lots of valuable information about the community we can get from there. Karen says there seems to be so many burials for a small island. Were people being brought here to be buried? That's a really good question. It's something that we thought about as well. You're completely right that it might not necessarily be that everyone buried in this cemetery is from the island itself. It may be that people came here. As we spoke about Lindisfarne, it really was sort of a center of early Christianity. So it would have been a very important place and a place of pilgrimage as well. So it could well be, yes, that some of these individuals aren't from the island itself. Let's see. What kind of fossils are St. Cuthbert's beads? That's a really good question. I'm not actually sure myself. You'll have to look that one up. I'm sorry, I'm not 100% on them. They are really beautiful, and I think they're just such like a perfect shape to be made into those rosary beads. You can really see why they would be utilized in that way. But I'm sorry, I'm not sure, Mac, what kind of fossil they actually are. I'm not very good at my fossils. Dave has asked, yes, so Dave has asked, in areas where we found several individuals buried on top of each other, is that because of simple overcrowding or mass casualty? So in areas where we found a lot of individuals buried in sort of a concentrated area, that tends to be because of the sort of the period of use of the cemetery and how often people are being buried in there. So yes, it's sort of a overcrowding thing where burials are just being put on top of burials and cut into features, and things get a little bit jumbled up. So it's not necessarily a mass casualty. But I believe that we did have a charnel pit, Harriet can correct me if I'm wrong, in Trench 2 East, which it was either in Trench 2 East or it was in a different trench that we opened. But we definitely had one year, which we believe was created, I think it was when the lime kiln was being constructed. So they have lifted burials. Yeah, we've had several charnel pits. They've lifted burials and sort of placed them somewhere else. So things are being moved around as well and changed. It's just such a long period of chronology on this site, and so many different phases and things. So yeah, it does get quite complicated. It's quite a mystery to work out sometimes, but it's always a good challenge. Maya has asked about the difference in size of the island during the time that the abbey was in use. That's a really good question. If you can sort of see behind me, I've sort of, actually it's not quite on the right side, but essentially where you can see our trenches here, right in front of those is a dip in the field, and it's quite like a dramatic dip. That is actually where the sea used to come to. In fact, I wonder actually if I would be able to show you using my PowerPoint. So you can see this is the shape of the island now. But if you can sort of see down here, this is kind of where our trenches are on the end of the island here. This would have looked very different back in the time. The sea level was very different, and it actually came right up to about where we're digging. So you can see that the landscape and the shape of the island has changed over time. And things like the sand dunes, which are up in the top of the island here, they have all shifted over time as well. So definitely the environment would look a bit different, maybe not too dissimilar, but yes, there would have been differences compared to how it looks now. So absolutely, you're correct, Maya. Yes, so Della has said that the bees are the stems of crinoids. Thank you. Someone who knows their fossils much better than me. So yes. Aideen has asked, do we do any analysis on the bones to work out where people may have been from originally? We might, yes. So it sort of depends. We don't want to do sort of intense analysis on every individual that we lift, because we do lift quite a few from this site. As we said, we try not to touch them unless we absolutely have to, so they're only lifted if we believe that either they can tell us something valuable or if we need to access layers that are underneath them. But if there are any skeletons that are particularly significant, for instance, this year we lifted the remains of someone, as Ben said, who may have had bone cancer. Someone like that is an individual who we might do some more analysis on, for instance, ancient DNA or isotopic analysis, just to find out a bit more about who they are, purely because if it's someone so significant, we do want to do that little bit more research and find out a bit more about that person themselves. So yes, we might do some analysis on some of the individuals, isotope analysis to work out where they might have been from originally, but it won't necessarily be on every individual. But it does give us quite an interesting insight into what kinds of people were being buried on this site. I think we've had a few more questions in our Q&A. Paul has said, what fresh water sources existed on the medieval island community? Could the drains be transporting fresh water to livestock and drinking troughs? That's a really good question, actually, and a really valid point. As far as fresh water sources go, I believe there was a lake on the island. Again, I could be wrong, but I imagine that that would be quite a good fresh water source. Whether the drains were for transporting water or for something else, I don't think we're entirely sure on yet. That's something that sort of we hope to investigate, as I said, the purpose of the drain, and hopefully that would help to tell us what they were transporting, whether it's fresh water or wastewater. But I believe, I don't believe this area that we're digging in was used as pasture land for animals at any point. I may be wrong though. So unsure about that one, but it is a good point, the idea of transporting fresh water. That's a really good suggestion, actually. Thank you. That was Dave, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh no, it's Paul. Thank you, Paul. So that's all. I think I don't see any more questions coming in, so hopefully I've answered everything. If you do have any more questions, you're always welcome to get in touch with us and ask. But in the meantime, I'll share my screen one more time so we can do a wrap up. Do make sure you're staying up to date with the timeline. That's where we're going to be sharing any new developments that might come in over the final weekend for you guys to keep your eye on. And as always, do make sure that you're looking at the website as well and our social media for any updates there. Do remember that you can join us on a dig. We have plenty of opportunities to join us in the field. So if you're not a crowdfunder and you would like to be a crowdfunder in future, do keep an eye on our calendar. And you can also join our mailing list. Our campaigns for 2024 will be starting up sort of towards the end of this year. So if that's something that you're interested in, do feel free to have a look. And yeah, last but not least, just thank you again for being such a wonderful audience, and a massive thank you to our crowdfunders for making all of this event and this dig and this archaeology all possible. We'll send you some more updates before the dig finishes, but in the meantime, I'll let you get back to your Fridays, and I hope you all have a lovely afternoon, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye, everyone.